Purple Heart Homes presents Putting the Pieces Back Together, a forum for veterans and the community to connect. Here are your hosts, veterans John Gallina and Brad Borders.
Lucy, I'm home.
There's about to be a fight up in here.
Ain't gonna be no fight up in here. Look here, Ricky. You better get in line.
Yeah, I'm going to explain something to you.
That's what I learned while I was in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna get you a ticket back there, right? You gone for a month.
As long as Devin ain't going with me, I'm good.
Whoa. Shots fired.
Welcome to Putting the Pieces Back Together. We're trying to put everything back together after John's hiatus on a secret mission far away.
Well, if y'all wouldn't have broke it all while I was gone.
I don't know. Ratings went up while you were gone, so I don't know what to tell you.
Is that right?
Watch them plummet today. So, so, hey, welcome to Putting the Pieces Back Together, presented by Purple Heart Homes. We are a 501c3 out of Statesville, North Carolina. We seek to solve veteran housing issues through safety and accessibility renovations, manufacturing tiny homes, and trying to do our best to solve problems for those who have served our country. And we're really grateful to be able to do that. We're grateful that you're listening today. It is the 79th anniversary of D-Day today.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I heard
it's hard to celebrate such a somber day.
Well,
what took place.
I heard a great story this morning from a sister radio show.
We've already heard it three times.
On William Wilcox. And
heard
so
it once live and twice repeated by Brad.
If you haven't heard this, so the on the celebration of D-Day. On the celebration of D-Day, the greatest airborne operation of all time and the invasion and the liberation of Europe, the United States government has now commenced with an airborne operation on the island of Guam to eradicate snakes, brown tree snakes, from they're an invasive species that is eating rare birds there, right? This is a true story. And so the U.S. government spent $8 million to parachute mice into Guam that are filled, they're fed Tylenol, and they parachute them in these little cardboard parachutes so that the snakes will eat the mice, and evidently the snakes are allergic to Tylenol, and it's going to kill them.
I just don't know how they found out the snakes were allergic to Tylenol. Did they have a headache? Did somebody try and stomp it with their heel?
I have no idea.
Just didn't work?
I just know that the greatest on the celebration of the greatest airborne operation of all time, this year we're celebrating airborne operation of little mice underneath cardboard parachutes to eradicate snakes from the island
I'd much
of
rather
Guam.
talk about the artillery. Yeah. We should have shot the mice in through artillery shells.
Yeah, it's Sabo round filled with mice.
Yeah.
So, and when they explode, mice just run everywhere, and then the snakes are gone, then everybody can return. Evidently, the snakes it was something like 13,000 snakes per acre.
That is just unbelievable.
It's just like it's Tammy's worst nightmare.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and mice and snakes, right? It's like it's her worst nightmare.
So in honor of D-Day, we got just some really great stuff going on today. Certainly, we got a fantastic guest, and I'm really curious. We got the famous Pat Shannon,
best guest of all time,
on the show with us today. Pat, have you ever sat in that chair?
You know, I haven't. This is the first time I've sat in this chair.
I mean, when you came in, I thought you were just going to get right behind the board and just start going away.
No, that's Isaiah's job. He does a great job at that.
Isaiah does do a great job.
He does. He does a great job.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the show.
But this is kind of unique. It's small over here.
Yeah.
Or I'm getting larger. One.
I find this really small.
Nobody puts Pat in a corner.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But before we get started, I thought, about the show today and being the 79th anniversary of D-Day, as Brad said, certainly something we never want to forget. And this whole idea of what those men were doing and why they were doing it. But I think there's some unique stories that are often not told. And I've been reading a book here, Facing the Mountain, that was recommended to me by Brian Sohovich here recently. And just as we were talking about service, and I had never really learned or studied about the Japanese Americans and in particular the 522nd, which is an artillery unit, Brad.
Oh my gosh.
That served all across Europe and basically they were one of the most revered fighting forces that America had deployed.
Because they were artillery?
No, not because they were artillery, but particularly because of their dedication and their commitment to fight and bring honor to their families, as their families were in concentration camps in America while they were fighting a war for freedom, and they were truly fighting for their own freedom. And so a couple of things that I thought were kind of stood out in the book, and before we get to Pat, I just want to call out, because I think they reference to some of the challenges we face today in our military with post-traumatic stress, with people having clarity and understanding of what it's about to serve and really what war is like. And so I'm just going to read a couple of little pieces out of this. This is from June 25th, and it says they clambered out of their trucks and marched 15 miles up narrow, winding roads into the hills, and closing in on the front lines as artillery shells regularly whistled over their heads, fired from somewhere in the rear, their divisional artillery trying to soften up whatever lay ahead in the hills. And then it goes on to say, just kind of paraphrasing, it goes on to say, whether they were religious or not, whether they were Buddhist, Christian, or Shinto, or none of the above, whether they had ever prayed in their lives, they prayed now as the earth trembled and flashes of light lit up in the hills ahead. In the morning, they were to attack. And then it goes on to say, few of them slept that night despite the long hike. Mostly they lay on the cold ground, looking up into the stars and wondering what it would be like. But the wondering was fruitless. They couldn't really know. They couldn't know that they were about to see things and to do things that would change them utterly. Things they would regret, things that would sear their soul, and things they would cherish beyond all reckoning. They couldn't yet understand that they were about to step off the edge of the world. How true is that?
That's
That
true.
we often don't think about, what you face in that imminent moment, knowing what you're about to enter into. And there's so many great stories in this book, and I could literally spend an hour going through it. And there's a couple of chaplains that are followed through the book, and I shared with Brad, being a chaplain, this one particular story that I found very interesting. As the chaplains were about to enter into the battlefield to go retrieve some of the wounded and killed. And in the process, one of the chaplains was injured with shrapnel, and he took 6 pieces of shrapnel across his side, his back, and his butt. And in the process of making his way back to the front line, he jumps on a bicycle with a wound on his butt rides his bicycle back to the front line.
Bicycles won the war.
It reminded me of Brad. I was like, I wonder if this is where Brad learned to ride a bike.
Yeah, that's it. That's how we won the war.
Is that a part of
Bicycles,
chaplain
right?
training?
That is. That's part of chaplain training. So that's awesome, man.
I got to tell you, we just think about military service, and we think about today's soldiers, and we think about today's airmen. We oftentimes forget about those that led the way and went before us, and it's something that we can't do. We have to remember those that have served and sacrificed, and we've got a veteran in Charlotte, North Carolina, that turns 100 this week, and World War II vet.
Yep.
And we can't forget those men. They are still out there.
Yeah,
and so many families that serve to support the effort too.
Yeah, if you're a veteran listening, and perhaps you served in World War II, and you're listening, thank you for your service. And then many of our listeners have family members that served in World War II that are no longer with us. The way we honor and protect that memory is by celebrating in a somber way, days like today, Memorial Day, and things like that. And so we're really grateful, and grateful for that generation that came home from that war and built our country into what it is. So have a memorable D-Day today.
Yeah.
So
and just for the record, the 30th Division did in fact land on D-Day +5 at Omaha Beach. Just got to make sure I throw that in there for all our 30th listeners out there.
Couldn't go on day 1. Had to go on day 5.
Well, that's right. It would have just run everybody off if they would have showed up on day
That's right.
1.
Yeah, it wouldn't have
they
been
would have
epic.
just run.
Yeah,
Right.
everybody would have just run for their lives. All the Germans just going, "Oh my gosh, it's the 30th Division. What are we gonna do?" Yeah.
Well, back then they were known as Roosevelt's SS.
Yeah,
so,
I don't even know if I'd go there. So.
So let's move on to
Please.
our guest, Pat Shannon. Pat, I remember one of the early conversations we had when Brad and I first started the show here. I said, "So, Pat, you served in the Army Air Corps," and you were like, "John, no, I'm not that old."
John was thinking Pat was like flying biplanes and shooting at the Red Baron. Right?
I did try to enlist, but I was 5 years old. At
Yeah,
the
there
time
you
of
go.
the,
There you go. So,
Air Force.
welcome to the show, Pat Shannon.
Thank you very much, Brad.
So,
John.
for those that
Yeah.
don't know, Pat Shannon is
Tabby?
a local
Well,
legend
hello.
here. Pat had a show on WSIC for 40 years now, and so it doesn't seem like that long.
Seems a
But-
lot longer for a lot of
Yeah,
people.
I would listen to Pat when I was a young fella, right?
In fact, let me interject this about you, Brad Borders. Wayne Rogers, whom we both know.
That's right. Shout out to Wayne.
When you were so-called working with Tar Heel Lumber, and I'd already
Wait a minute, you said so-called working?
So-called.
Has that
So to
has that been a lifelong kind of theme? Is that?
I know Wayne was trying to figure out really what it is Brad was doing.
Can you give me Wayne's phone number?
Well, he called his dad, he said, "Jack, what is Brad supposed to be doing here at Tar Heel Lumber?" And we could never figure it out. I mean, I had already retired, but one thing was sure: this guy's never going to be a chaplain. I mean, that was with what he
100%.
was doing. This,
Thank God he made
No
handy
way.
mortars.
No way. Wayne Rogers had a say, and he would pull me up to the we had a big plate glass window at
Yep.
Tar Heel Lumber Company, and we could look out into the warehouse. He said, "Let me show you something. Look out there. What do you see?" And there was a bunch of guys out there driving forklifts and moving around.
Yep.
I said, "I see guys working." He said, "You know what I see? I see a lot of activity, but I don't see any productivity."
That's hilarious.
That was his legendary.
That was Wayne.
Wayne had a lot of legend. I've got a lot of Wayne Rogers stories. I won't tell them all today, but Wayne, we love you, brother.
Yeah. So Pat, you were sharing where were you born? Where are you from?
Well, originally Monroe, North Carolina, which was at the time during World War II. The war was about the World War II was about a year in when I was hatched, and Camp Sutton was a pretty large military installation there. Monroe was a big railroad town at the time, 20 miles south of Charlotte or east of Charlotte. And my dad was chief of police at that time, so it kept him pretty busy.
Yep.
And it was also a POW for Italian POWs there.
Oh, wow.
In fact, North Carolina had many German camps, POW camps, and Camp Sutton was one of the POW camps there. Then my dad wound up going with the prison department. We wound up temporarily in Henderson, North Carolina, then came to Statesville here in 51 or 52, something like that, 52. And been here ever since and stuff.
Wow.
And my sister, by the way, was in the Air Force. She joined in when women weren't really joining that much. And Jane, if you're listening, if I get the date wrong, I think it was 1949 she joined. And they still had the WAC uniforms for the WAF, as they were called. Each service had that. Women had their own nomenclature there for their names. But anyway, she had some great stories she would tell about that. Met her husband, who was an Air Force flight engineer, and they married. And then at that time, when she became pregnant, she got out of the Air Force, but still considers herself a veteran, which
That's
she
awesome.
should.
Wow.
Yeah.
Served quite a life
We
there.
are really looking forward to digging into your service here. And I know Brad's got 3 pages of notes and questions, and so we got a lot to get through and unpack. But we're coming up on a break here. And just before we go to the break, you were telling us your dad was in the service.
Yes.
And just very briefly, got about
Yeah.
30 seconds before break. Tell us a little bit about that.
He was a pilot.
Okay.
He was in the cavalry, and they'd have him. We'd sort of pilot over there, and then pilot over there. No, actually, he was in the cavalry. He was a farrier and would shoe horses and break horses at Fort Sam Houston and had quite a year there.
All
That's
right.
cool.
We're going to go to break. We'll be back here in about 3 minutes, and we'll have the project of the week with Devil Dog Devin.
You are listening to Putting the Pieces Back Together, presented by Purple Heart Homes. All right, we are back here live, Putting the Pieces Back Together, presented by Purple Heart Homes. And we have got special guest Pat Shannon with us today. And before we get back to Pat and his stories, we want to hear from Devil Dog Devin and his exploits as he has been traveling the world to serve veterans and set up chapters.
Exploits.
Great story.
Exploits, huh?
Oh, there's plenty of them with lots of how do you say that?
Explicit?
Explicitives.
Oh, explicitives.
Those were all coming from John as I was driving.
Or in other words, you could say colorful metaphors.
Colorful metaphor.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
There was a lot of
probably
those.
Yeah.
You know what I found most interesting is, all around the world there's this sign. It's red and it's octagon shaped, but it has different 4-letter words on it. And
Alto.
And in Puerto Rico it says PARE, right? Pear.
Right.
And for whatever reason, while
He thought you
Devil
meant take
Dog
a
is
skin off an
driving,
apple or something.
Yeah,
I thought-
he ignored these signs, every single one of them. Like almost
Pear,
killed me
that means
multiple
two.
times.
Oh,
That
yeah.
means two. There was two of us in the vehicle. We
Yeah,
get to
but
go that
that's-
way.
You can't. and
Devin,
not,
please stop. He's like, but it's an interstate. I'm like, I don't care. It's a stop sign. Stop. He's like, that was a stop sign.
yeah, and he can't spell either.
Can't spell, can't read. You know what?
Can't
he's
drive.
he's a normal Marine.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank good Lord that Purple Heart Homes took pity on me and gave me a job.
That's what we do.
You're
we do.
helping veterans, one veteran at a time.
Awesome.
All right, Devil Dog, talk to us about your project of the week.
Speaking of veterans, let's talk about Puerto Rico. Both John and I got a chance to hear an Air Force veteran, David, speak at Memorial Day celebration, and David was just so grateful. We're currently in the process of helping him build a small home in Puerto Rico on his family's property, and one of the things that was most impactful for me is as we're listening to David, he's talking about how amazing it was to go from a 2-man tent to a 4-man tent. And I was like, wow.
Why didn't he have a home?
Well, he's a
Hurricane Maria.
Hurricane Maria took out his home,
and that was not his wife.
That was not 2000. Was 2018, I believe, is when that happened. And typically, those things would recover a lot quicker. COVID happened, and nobody went down there and helped those folks. Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory. It's part of the U.S., and we often forget about our veterans down there. And something that David, after everybody was done speaking, the ceremony was over, he come to me, and he's put his hands on my shoulder, and he said, will you just tell them to stop? I don't need new windows. My neighbor's got some old used ones, and I don't need a new refrigerator. That old one works just fine. I didn't serve during war. I'm a Cold War veteran. I don't deserve this. That's what he told me. That he didn't deserve it. And the fact is whether you serve during peacetime or wartime, you had a commitment and a willingness to serve your country. And he did, and he has disabilities from that. He can't hear when there's background noise. He's no less deserving than any of our other veterans. So, David, if you're out there listening, hey, thank you for your service, brother.
Awesome. Thanks,
Just
Appreciate
some
it.
great people, great partners. A tremendous amount of service members have come out of Puerto Rico. Over 200,000 service members, veterans currently live in Puerto Rico, and just a great pride for their service and their contribution.
I served with almost an entire unit from Puerto Rico in Iraq. They were stationed at the base that I mainly stayed at, and they were all almost completely Spanish speakers only, and they were the mayor's cell. Do you remember the mayor's cell at the different? And so basically, the mayor's cell take care of all the infrastructure on the base, and so sometimes it was a challenge to try to get stuff. To try to, for those of us who don't, I'm not bilingual.
The Army's plan, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah,
one more barrier to get
that's right.
2x4.
Yeah, that's right. We just needed, and my colonel, he was always wanting to build things, and so, but they were great people, and we were really excited about serving with them, and so that's awesome. I'm glad you guys had the opportunity to go down there.
So what most people, I don't know that they're aware about Pat Shannon, is he was a radio broadcaster, and we found a little clip here as what it makes me think of to be a military radio broadcaster.
Awesome.
Isaiah?
Good morning, Vietnam!
Pat, is that how you open your show? So tell us a little bit about your time as a broadcaster in the Air Force.
Well, it covers quite a lot of time. But actually, the AFSC, or MOS, as you Army guys call it, Air Force Specialty Code, I was identified as a radio and TV broadcast specialist, highly trained.
Yes.
And went through school at Fort Slocum, which is no longer there, right outside of New Rochelle, New York, and trained us in the peculiarities of broadcasting overseas, because we had host country sensitivities we had to be aware of, like certain things you couldn't see.
Right.
Like, for instance, when I was in Taiwan, I spent 2 tours there, Taipei and Tainan. We couldn't play, because of the situation of the island, Red Sails in the Sunset by Fats Domino. Seriously, because they said, well, it's because the sunset over mainland China.
Right.
And if you see red sails
Yeah.
Get that thing?
Yeah.
So there were even sensitivities back then.
Wow.
But
It's crazy.
it was great. I mean, it was something that I just felt really honored to be able to do. And I mean, I would rather have been a jet fighter pilot or something, the Tom Cruise type of
Right.
guy, a Top Gun or something. But I was a broadcaster.
You were the maverick of the radio.
I was the maverick of the, and when you look at Good Morning Vietnam with Robin Williams, even Adrian Cronauer says that was Robin Williams. I mean, those of us, I mean, sure, we did things. It was easier to ask forgiveness and permission on
Right.
a lot of stuff there. But the movie was a lot about him, but a lot of it was true because we were there to help keep the morale up, to make it as much for the guy serving in Vietnam or Korea, as much like home as we could.
Yeah,
You know,
sure.
people would call in, hey, can you play such
Yeah.
and such? Sure, we'll get it for you.
Did you cross
Dedicate it.
paths with Adrian Cronauer? Did
No,
you-
no. I
Yeah.
actually was there before he showed up. I was
Okay.
in Vietnam in '65.
Yeah.
Actually, a few dependents were still hanging around then, so it wasn't the hostilities. We did have the radio station bombed, which we had one in Saigon there, and the Brink Hotel is where we were located. Bob Hope was coming through. He was scheduled to stay there. And they had to route him to some other quarters. And when he was doing his show, he said it's the first time he's ever had a hotel pass him by. Oh, my gosh. But we were off the air like 30 minutes, and that was it. We were back on the air. But anyway, I've got, like, I know this is about transitioning, putting the pieces back together. And I was thinking, when you look at my career, I mean, it was basically one of the most enjoyable plush type of assignments you could have in like Taiwan, Germany, Korea, in times where the hostilities weren't that bad, even Vietnam, Guam, except for the rat snakes. But
And the
fortunately,
parachuting mice.
Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
You know how they got there? In the wheel wells of the B-52s.
The snakes did.
From Thailand, when the B-52s back were flying and landing in around the bases there in Thailand, the snakes would crawl up in the wheel wells. When they come back to Anderson Air Force Base, in
They'd
Guam,
come out.
They'd come out, and that's what brought them there. And
We did,
they
I wonder
were a
if
big
there's, like,
problem.
deboarding now. All snakes leave the wheel well.
Now, what are they going to do with all those mice that have no headaches?
Yeah.
Which means they have sex all the time.
Yeah, that's right.
They're going to be really.
Is that an FCC?
No, Nevin. That is amazing.
You can't say sex. Oh, that's all right. I'll take that back. But if you got time, I do have a really
Yes, we have
really
time.
funny story.
Yeah.
I was in Iran, the Far East, for a couple of years, 2 years actually, in Tehran. And we were taking over the radio TV station from the Army, which was dedicating at that time a lot of its energies towards Vietnam. But at that time, the military advisory group in Iran was the second largest next to Vietnam. So we were providing, meaning the Air Force training and the Shaw's pilots and maintenance people there, even though they'd already been through the pilot school. So we had a radio and TV station and pumped a lot of money in it. Our headquarters was in Wiesbaden in Germany. But we were inside the Iranian motor pool. So we had security around that. And also coming in, there were Iranian guards who would wave us through. And one evening, after I signed off, I was going home about midnight. And we still kept people in there. I left the station, turned and was going toward the gate, and there was an Iranian guard with his weapon just pointing right at me. And, so I stopped the vehicle, don't move, kept my hands on the wheel, and another guard came up and knocked and, asked for identification. So I gave the identification, and the guy never moved. And for the longest time, I just kind of waited, what's going to happen here? Is this the revolution? And as it turned out, they waved me on through. So after they had someone from the embassy come up and explain what was going on, these guys work here, it's an American radio and TV station. So anyway, they established this. What they did, they took pictures of all the announcers and their families with their automobiles and put them in the guard check, the Iranian guard check, so that when any of us came up there, they would look, oh, okay, he'll come through. So we had a guy, Bart Zarconi, who was a professional clown, and he did. Now you can imagine what happened. He would put on his makeup he would do a kid show on Saturday morning. We had the little cartoons and stuff and everything. So Bart would do his makeup at home. His wife would help him with it. So he was in makeup as Arconi the Clown when he came through the gate. And this was right after they had taken the pictures. So they wind up stopping him. And, and the embassy people show up and they're shaking their heads. And we finally realize the reason they stopped him, and the pictures they took were with Polaroid black and white.
Right.
So the guard said, he has a blue car. This is a gray car.
Right.
So,
Not
but
because he was dressed as
Not
a clown.
because he was dressed as a clown.
The clown is in the wrong car. Well, it's like I've always said, the Air Force is just full of clowns.
You're right.
It's a clown
That's
show.
right.
Yeah, and a clown
And
car.
proud of it. That's true. But
even know what to
going
think
through
of that.
2 transitions. I actually got out, took a break in service in 65, came back here, worked at the station, went back in about a year later, and then retired. So I went through 2 transitions as a first enlistee, getting out, making that transition, and then retiring. And I'm not sure which one was the toughest as far as making that transition, because regardless of how much you look forward to getting out and going back to civilian life, you miss it. I mean, there's something about the camaraderie and everything there in the military. But retiring, well, that's permanent. That's you're not going back.
No.
You're not getting back.
Curious, and one of the thoughts and questions that Brad had wrote down is, really, how did let me back up a little bit. We think about job skills, like it's really hard to transition artillery, training into civilian, workplace, right? We're not really blowing stuff up. Yes, we got to keep inventory. We got to move equipment. We got to maintain stuff. There's lots of different skill sets that transition. But in a big picture, those two things just don't really go side and side, civilian and military occupations. But thinking about, being a broadcaster, how did your time in service as a broadcaster inform you to be a broadcaster in civilian life?
Well, it's pretty similar. The only difference between American Forces Radio and Television Service and WSIC and other radio stations are commercials.
Right.
That's it. I mean, we do everything. We play records. We have the same equipment and stuff. I mean, obviously, it's changed a lot, I'm sure, now, the 35 years I've been away from it. But one interesting thing, when I did bring my 214 here to the station, Bob Marlowe was our station manager. This was 1965. And I gave him a 214. He was Army. And he's looking at it. And I was separated early. I got what is called an early out because there was not enough time to reassign me from coming back from overseas to Travis Air Force Base, where I was being discharged. Because you have to have at least more than 6 months. And I had about 4 months remaining in my 4 years. So they, on the DD-214, it said, convenience of the government. So Bob Marlowe is looking at this 214. He said, what is convenience of the government? Why was it convenient for them to get you out of there?
Yeah, normally it's more convenient for them to keep you than it is for them to get you out.
But that was kind of weird and strange there. But you hear about the 214s now. If you go and make sure you have your 214 registered with the Register of Deeds office, there are several merchants now around the area that will give you a discount. And at the Register of Deeds office, there's a card. I'm not sure if it's a mini 214 or if it's a special card that with certain merchants in the area, in addition to like Lowe's, will give us 10%. There are others that will give you a discount or a special consideration for your time in service with that. So if you haven't registered your 214, folks, guys, gals, make sure you have that done and get that little ID card. If you've already registered, go over there and get the little ID card.
Curious question before we go to our next commercial break here. In the process of your transition, did you know that you wanted to stay in radio? Was it kind of planned for you that you were going to come to WSIC or a station?
Ironically, when I retired, I knew I was going to go in broadcasting. That's basically really all I knew I wanted to do. And I had big plans. I was going to wind up in Los Angeles doing some morning drive time, making lots of money.
So much better.
But I wound up here. I loved it here. And decided, got married, had a little kid on the way, and the recruiter called me at the right time and said, we can pay for that baby. We'll get that baby paid for. But upon retiring, I came back and applied for a civil service job, and guess where I wound up? Army recruiting at the detachment in or the what do they call? Not the brigade. The brigade was down in Georgia. Whatever
battalion,
the
yeah.
battalion, the
Yeah.
battalion, recruiting battalion in Charlotte.
Oh, okay.
So I was with the advertising publicity group.
That's awesome.
There as a
is
civilian,
really
GS9, and liked
Yeah.
it. It was
All
pretty
right.
good.
Well, we'll get a roll to a commercial
Uh-oh.
break. We'll be back in 3 minutes with Putting the Pieces Back Together and Pat Shannon.
All right, welcome back to Putting the Pieces Back Together, presented by Purple Heart Homes. And we are here with Air Force veteran, broadcast extraordinaire, Pat
Legend.
Shannon.
The legend himself, the man, the myth, the legend.
Oh, shucks.
Every
you
man's
guys.
envy, every woman's desire.
I don't even know why I'm here, but I really because I listen to your program. I have never missed one of your episodes.
Oh, bless your
Of
heart.
this, even when you were
punishing
only
yourself.
when you were only a half hour. And remember, you
Before
messed
we
up so
got
much, we
fired.
made you come to an hour.
Yeah,
and we
that's
said
right.
if you mess this up, it's going to be 2 hours.
I know. Well, this is episode 79
Love the
today.
program and the guests whom you have. I mean, they're
Yeah.
wonderful stories, great
Yeah.
stories, and I've actually been choked up too on some of the
They've been good.
the situations I've heard and the transitions the guys have made. It's just unbelievable. It's a
Well,
great show. We're fortunate to have you.
Well, we're really glad
It's
to be
been,
here.
and
Yeah.
it's been good for us, just being able to meet and connect with some new folks. And, truly, I think it's beyond just helping the community understand their role and responsibility in reintegrating vets, but it helps us to know that as veterans, we're not alone,
Yeah,
right?
for
that
sure.
our experiences are not necessarily always unique. While the circumstances might be unique, the overall experience,
Yeah.
there's some commonality.
Yeah, a lot of common ground. I know as a little kid, growing up in the 70s here in Statesville, WSIC was what everybody listened to. I used to listen to the top 40 records that were played on here, and I remember as a kid going, wow, it would be really cool to have a radio program. I mean, when people say, how you doing? I'll go, I'm living the dream, right? And I'm on the radio every week, and I can't believe it. It's what I thought about when I was a little kid. So I'm really glad to be here and glad to be advocating for veterans every Tuesday on WSIC. So we're really grateful, and we're so glad that you're here. And I want to talk about the Home Ad Show, which is for those that are listening maybe on Spotify or watching on YouTube and you're not from our area, the Home Ad Show in Statesville, North Carolina is a staple, right? And it has been around for 40 years. And
wow.
So I want so tell us a little bit about what is the Home Ad Show and how did it come about and what's the genesis behind it?
That's the hardest question I'm asked. That's the hardest for me to answer
Yeah.
because I really don't know what it is.
Right.
I mean, I've thought about it. It actually goes back to as far back as 1950 because I was kind of researching over in the library some old record landmark issues, and I came on a radio schedule. And they had at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the Trading Post for 15 minutes.
Right.
So it goes back. In 1965, when I got out of the Air Force and came back here, it was on from 6:30 until 7. Then we started the top 40 stuff at 7 o'clock at night till sign off. And so I did that then, the Home Ad. Then I went back in the Air Force, came back. It was moved to 9 o'clock for an hour. It used to be like Radio Bingo, and then they changed it to Home Ad. But what we discovered is that there is a need for it out there. There are people that have things they want to try to maybe convert to cash, or they don't need them anymore, or they can't quite afford a new mower or a new wedge whacker or setup, and they're wanting to get a good deal, or they just want to talk to somebody.
Yeah.
And you find that a lot too.
Yeah, and it's so different from, there's so many things out there with the internet. There's the Facebook marketplace.
Sure.
If you want to buy and sell something, I think what's unique about the Home Ad Show is the people that call in, right?
Yep.
That's what makes it great. That's what makes the show great. And you got some callers that are regulars, right?
Yes, we do.
He's got callers that call in during our show, waiting for him to get on the air.
Hey, y'all get off the air. I'm wanting to talk to Pat, right?
That's right. Yeah, that can get a little embarrassing. And then after we're off the air, they'll call and talk to Jeff or Mickey Sawyer. Can you give me the number of that guy that had the...
That's right. What's the
pontoon
most
boat?
interesting thing as you look
Wow.
back? The most interesting thing that somebody called in to sell or buy on the show? Can you remember anything that just kind of stands out?
Well, Brad, it's because it's like every day when you hit that button, it's
Right,
going to be
you
a
never
new
know.
surprise.
You never know.
And we've had houseboats on.
Mm-hmm.
We've had, of course, farm animals of all kinds. We've had and houses.
I got a
and
goat that I need to get
goats
rid
and
of.
Fading goats
Yeah,
and all
fading
that stuff.
goats.
The only thing
Has
we will
anybody
not.
ever tried to sell their spouse on?
We have a disclaimer. If you've got some useless thing around the house that serves no purpose, spouse is not included. You can call that. We'd have that tried.
That's incredible.
We did have it's kind of a sad one of our callers who had been calling in for a while. Another caller called me just before we were starting Home Ad to let me know she had passed on. And I said, "Are you sure?" I said, "I always kind of check the obituaries for two reasons. If I'm not in there, then I can come in and do Home Ad.
That's right.
But
yeah.
to see if there might be somebody that, as I get older, there are more people I know now that are passing on. Well, anyway, so I did a little kind of a tribute to her, and sorry, well, 2 callers later, there she is. Pat, I'm not dead. I'm not even sick.
It's like a Andy Griffith episode.
That's right. You're not?
Yeah. Well, I was gone, but now I'm not. Well,
That's
once you're
right.
gone, you're gone. You can't come back. It just ain't decent.
That's right. No, you're sorry. You're gone.
That is
But that was one of the most embarrassing moments.
Right.
So, from then on, I've never trust the callers there, because there was someone by the same name that had passed away there. But eventually, she did pass on.
Yeah.
And stuff. But her husband called in for quite a while after that, And but it's an amazing program, and it's like family.
Yeah.
And during let's see, 85 was what, 33 years ago,
Yeah.
I guess, when I retired and came back, and so during that period of time, I've lost a lot of my family. I've lost my pets, and the easiest way I've found to deal with that was to actually go on the air. To be with the family, to be with Home Ad.
Right.
And it's like, and John's like me. It's hard when we get into a very emotional thing we're saying to talk.
Yeah.
You know, when you were reading the passage about the Japanese in D-Day invasion, it's very, it'll affect me, and I can't talk very well. So I have to stop for a minute, and gather myself, and then I can talk about it. And losing my family, my mom, my dad, and all it was pretty rough. And then my pets that had been part of Home Ad, they were mascots and stuff. But I'm able to get through it. And in fact, just recently we lost our little Bichon about 3 weeks ago.
Oh,
So
it's brutal.
And in fact, Justin, our soon-to-be new owner, whom we're training as best we can, he said, "You don't have to do the show." I said, "Yes, I do. I really need to be on the air."
It's therapy, right?
It's
so
therapy.
in the with technology the way it is, and this is this forum is a very old school forum. Radio's been around for 100 years. What do you see? I mean, I think the more things change, sometimes the more things stay the same. All right, and I think that there's a specific need, and I just heard this the other day that Ford is no longer going to put AM radios in cars, right?
Yep.
And what do you think the future is for broadcast radio, like what we're doing and like what you do? What does the future hold? Are we going to have a time where this is no longer a thing, or is this going to be one of those things that just holds on because of the connectivity and how people are brought together because of it?
The technology to me is just, it's like every week there's something new. There's something there that Isaiah is telling me about, or that's happening in this. The blogging that's going on that you see, the Facebook, having us on TV.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest difference, and I think the biggest positive, is that you're finding more and more people doing radio shows and doing different type of that is really, really more entertaining than back in the day when the only time you could go on radio was you have these oval tones and this
Right.
great. That was the prerequisite. And so we missed out a lot of good talent out there, people that had a lot of good things to do and could do great shows just because they didn't have that great so-called radio voice.
Yeah.
But now that doesn't matter. I mean, because you have shows where you've got the content and what people are putting out there and telling you about, I think is a lot,
Yeah,
a
I
lot
mean,
better.
Really interesting, Pat. Just a couple of thoughts there. I think laughter's good medicine, right?
Oh, it's definitely good
and,
medicine.
And just
Yep.
to, on the point of what Brad's saying, and kind of where's that going to change in some of these shows. I mean, so many different shows, and particularly the our friends down at iHeart, Woody and Wilcox, they bring a lot of laughter, right?
Every day.
And I mean, every day for
Every day.
hours on end, and just really being able to help people somewhat. I hate the term of disconnect, but really reconnect their mind into a happy place from maybe what's bothering them. But there's something you said that I want to draw out, and that is this idea of how when you're going through something that's created sorrow in your life, being on the air and broadcasting and sharing that information, talking about it, how that helps you, right?
Yep.
But I think it also helps the listener to know that they're not alone, that they're also going through something, right? And so this connectivity of emotions through the airwaves, and I just wish that more people would not be so afraid to talk about that pain.
Sure.
That they would realize that's something that can help them get through it. I was talking with a young man just yesterday, and how he, just emotionally closed himself off from everybody, right? And so he's got these challenges in life, and he doesn't feel like he's got anybody to talk to. Right, and that's the worst place we can be. And I've come to share with folks more and more that Purple Heart Homes is not just building houses. We're truly saving lives. It's about letting people know that we see them, we hear them, and that they matter. right? And that is fighting that epidemic of suicide.
I mean, some days we not only help veterans with their housing, but we go to the vet with them.
Yeah,
We
that's
go
right.
go to the veterinarian with them because their cat is sick. So that happened yesterday. So that was
But
awesome.
those are only for special assignments for the chaplain. Yeah. We will never send Mangum to the
Mangum never
to the
gets- yes.
veterinarian to help with the cat.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That is for sure. I think one of the things about, and especially about the Home Ad Show, it's very unique. It's just not. It's not something that you can pull up on any radio show just anywhere. But the great thing for me about technology now is that back in 1975, when I was listening to radio as a 10-year-old kid, if you missed it, you missed it.
Yep.
Right, there was no way to go back, right? And now the wonderful thing is that because everything is recorded,
Yep.
if you miss an episode live, you can go back and watch it anytime or listen to it anytime on all these platforms and everything. And so if people miss the Home Ad Show live on WSIC coming through their radio, they can go back on Facebook and watch it live and pick that thing up and that weed whacker or that fainting goat that was for
amazing.
sale.
I found it on YouTube.
Yeah,
Just kind of
right.
there it was on YouTube.
Yeah,
Little
on YouTube.
snippets and
You
stuff.
didn't even know you were out there,
Didn't
Pat.
even know it.
Yeah.
So speaking of goats, we closed on a house here recently.
right, we did.
And we built a house for a veteran. We went and did all the paperwork with the lawyer, and I get a phone call as I'm getting ready to go to the lawyer's office, and the phone calls the veteran. He says, "Hey, look, I've got a problem. We were getting in the truck and as we were to go to the lawyer's office, and lo and behold, we look out in the field and there's a new kid." I'm thinking, did it just wander up? I mean, is it the neighbor's kid? What is it? He's like, "Oh no. Our goat had a baby."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Okay, well, don't worry about the goat. Get to the lawyer's office. This is scheduled. You don't miss a lawyer's
right.
appointment
That's
and
right.
closing."
Yeah.
And so the veteran says, "All right, Mama, grab the kid and get in the truck and let's go."
They brought the goat to the closing.
Did they really?
Yeah, they brought
really
the goat.
did.
The goat was in the truck with them. An actual live goat in the truck at the closing.
So the receptionist held the baby goat while we signed all the
Yes,
papers.
it's incredible. Yes.
And then she was like, "I don't want you to take it with you. Can you
Yeah.
just leave it the rest of the day?"
Well, there's nothing like if you are down in this world and and sorrowful, just pull up on the internet for baby goats and just watch videos about baby goats, and life will be better for you. 'Cause
Or
baby
old goats. If you want an old goat, tune
Right.
into Home Ad. I'm right
Well,
there.
that's true. That's true. Yeah, old goats or young goats.
Old goats.
Yeah, mares eat oats and does eat oats, right?
Hey,
And
Little
little
lambs eat
Ivy
ivy. Yeah, that's right.
so you had a interesting story you shared with us earlier, as before we got on the show. Just real quick, to start to wrap up.
Yep.
Your dad was a
farrier, right.
a farrier, but he was also a sheriff in Monroe.
Well, no, he was the chief of police.
Chief of police.
Chief of police in Monroe, and actually ran for sheriff and got the mumps.
Yeah.
And
my.
they were pretty bad. So that's why he.
So, for those that don't know what a farrier is, that's somebody
They
who
shoot
shoes
horses,
horses. Yeah.
yes.
So that's how long ago it was when the Army still had a bunch of horses.
That's right.
But
you
who was
shoot
it that worked for him?
Jesse Helms Sr., Senator Helms' dad,
Yes.
was the assistant chief of police. And when Dad left, he became the chief of police there in Monroe after Dad left. But he worked with, in fact, when Jesse Sr. died, my dad was still living, and we went there, and the senator came in and we went there to the funeral, and there was Senator Helms, who knew my dad, and he was quite congenial and friendly. He remembered my dad and stuff.
That's
and
really
talked for
cool.
quite a while.
That's a neat story.
Yeah.
But,
Jesse
A
Helms.
lot of
was
local history.
Yeah, he's a famous senator from our state. So now, and
For lots
infamous
of
in
reasons.
some
Infamous
cases.
to many,
in some cases,
many folks,
so,
but
yeah,
had
well-
quite a career. You knew where he stood. On
Yeah,
those-
that. Oh, yeah.
Senator No, I think. They
Yeah,
call it.
Senator No. That's
Senator
exactly
No.
right. I remember that. So, well, we're drawing close to the end of the show.
Oh, really?
And, yeah, I know, Pat. It's
Oh,
been
man.
it's been lovely having you here, and
Gosh.
we want you to come back again because we've got a treasure trove of stories that need to be told that haven't been told. And so, hey, please listen to Pat Shannon coming up at 9 a.m., 9:05 a.m. for the Home Ad Show, and buy and sell, and maybe you can find find a fainting goat.
So I just got a text message from one of our listeners that I think is important for us to note that John hasn't tanked ratings today, as you implied earlier, but they said that Ford reverses the course and decides to keep the AM radio in vehicles.
Right, AM radio.
So there we go.
All right. Victory. Hey, we'll see y'all next week on Putting the Pieces Back Together.
You've been listening to Putting the Pieces Back Together with John Gallina and Brad Borders. Join us again next Tuesday at 8 a.m. and Saturday at 5 p.m. for Putting the Pieces Back Together on News Talk WSIC.